I've always wanted to draw loosely, but it's a challenge. My habit is to control everything, smooth blends, perfect shapes, no mistakes. This time, I'm trying something different. I start with Willow charcoal. It's soft, not too dark, and very easy to move around. It lets me block in quickly without worrying about being exact. The paper is Canson 1557, smooth but holds the charcoal well. Right now, I'm just trying to break out of my old habits and approach the drawing with a looser hand. I don't want to polish everything. I want to suggest forms instead of finishing them. I begin the drawing with the hair, not the face. Hair gives me more freedom to be loose. There's no need to be precise here. I can work with large shapes and see how things feel. This helps me warm up and build momentum. The lines are soft and changeable. I don't care about individual strands at this stage. It's more about getting a sense of mass and flow. Starting here keeps the pressure off. It's easier to make changes, and I don't feel stuck trying to get the eyes or mouth right too early. Still using Willow charcoal, I move on to block in the shape of the head. I smudge it lightly to soften the tone. This part isn't about getting the likeness. It's just about checking the proportions and overall structure. I look at the tilt of the head, the curve of the skull, and how it connects to the neck. If anything looks off, I can fix it easily at this stage. Everything stays very flexible. I don't rush into detail because that would lock things in too soon. I darken the hair a little to better define the outer shape. The silhouette helps guide the rest of the drawing. I'm not touching the face yet. It's too early for that. Right now, it's all about making sure the figure feels balanced and proportionate. I avoid working on any one spot for too long. I want to keep moving across the page so everything develops together. It's still loose, still changeable. Shaping the highlights in the hair is surprisingly effortless at this stage. I use a kneaded eraser to gently lift the charcoal, carving out those lighter strands and subtle gleams. Thanks to the Willow charcoal, the process feels soft and forgiving. It doesn't grip the paper too tightly, so lifting it off leaves behind this lovely, hazy texture. I'm not trying to make every strand precise. It's more about suggestion, letting light peek through in the right places. Now it's all about proportion. If the features don't sit right, the drawing won't hold together later on, but I don't overthink it. Willow charcoal allows me to move things around easily. I focus on getting the spacing between the features to feel natural. Still no detail, no line work, just soft marks and light shadow shapes to guide the next layer. I try not to draw anything too dark too soon. It's tempting to commit, but I hold back. These early decisions are flexible. I use the side of the willow stick to keep my marks soft and broad. I squint and step back often, checking the general rhythm of the face. It's not about likeness, just balance and flow. At this stage, the features are still floating a little, and that's fine. The Willow charcoal allows for easy adjustments. It's important not to rush. This gentle build-up gives me confidence for later stages, where the marks will matter more. With the face roughly placed, I move on to the neck. It's very simple here. Basically, I just sketch it with two lines that taper down into a triangular shape, forming the collar of the hanfu. I keep it abstract, no need for detail. Then I fill the inside with willow charcoal and smudge it softly with my finger. This is looking great so far, so I sketch in the upper clothes next. Not because they're the focus, but because they help me see the whole figure. I use light strokes to block in shapes. No folds, no textures, just a general sense of mass. It helps me plan the composition and spacing. Even though the clothes aren't the star of the drawing, they give structure and balance. Everything stays soft and adjustable. I'm not committing to anything just yet. This part of the process reminds me how helpful it is to take things slow. I'm not in a rush to finish the drawing, just gently building up values, little by little. Working in layers gives me space to observe. There's no pressure to get it perfect on the first pass. I can let things shift and settle at their own pace. The first layer is just a suggestion, not a commitment, and I quite like that. It helps me feel more relaxed, like the drawing and I are having a quiet conversation. As the form begins to take shape, I start to feel like the drawing is responding. It's no longer just me pushing charcoal around. It starts to push back a little. I glance at the shadow under the eye or the edge of the cheek, and it tells me where to go next. It's subtle, but that's what keeps it interesting. That sense of listening. I never feel like I'm forcing it. I'm just responding. Layer by layer, I'm learning what it wants to become. Now I switch tools from Willow charcoal to my blending stump. I load it with charcoal powder that I make myself by sanding down a charcoal pencil. It's a bit of a ritual at this point. The texture that comes from this combo is rougher than Pastel, but that's fine. I'm not after perfect smoothness. It keeps the drawing lively and a bit unpredictable. With the stump ready, I start darkening the eye and parts of the hair, especially the bangs. Still staying loose, I'm not defining anything sharply, just pushing the value a little deeper. This new material is more permanent than Willow charcoal, so I make sure I'm confident with the placement before I apply it. It's not the stage for fixing errors anymore. The stump leaves behind a slightly gritty texture. I actually like that. It stops the drawing from looking too polished. I let the surface be what it is. A bit uneven, a bit unpredictable. This helps maintain the expressive quality I'm aiming for. It doesn't have to look perfect to feel right. This is where it becomes clear why that first Willow charcoal sketch mattered. The stump doesn't erase easily, so every mark counts more now. But because I took time to get the structure right in the early stages, I can move forward with confidence. I'm not building the drawing, I'm developing it gently and with trust in the layers underneath. Now I switch to the Pastel applicator. Earlier, when I used the blending stump, the texture came out quite rough, which has its charm, but in some areas it felt a bit too harsh. So here I soften those parts. The applicator helps me lay down tone more smoothly and evenly, especially in the face where I want a softer surface. It's ideal for mid-tones and broader areas. Nothing too sharp, just gentle, painterly coverage. Once the tones are balanced and I'm happy with the proportions, I return to the blending stump. This time, I use it to build darker values, but I do it selectively. I don't darken everything. I focus mainly on the face and the areas surrounding it, where I want the viewer's eye to rest. Other parts, like the clothing or edges, are left softer, lighter. This contrast helps guide the composition without making it feel heavy. This is the stage where things often look awkward, a bit undefined, but I've learned not to panic here. Feeling lost doesn't mean something's gone wrong, it means I'm searching, and that's part of it. It's tempting to tighten everything too quickly, to try and fix things straight away. But more often than not, the best thing I can do is pause, step back, and wait. Let the mess sit for a bit. Eventually, something clicks, and when it does, it feels earned. Now I begin focusing on the eye. a key focal point in this portrait, so every mark here really matters. I switch to my charcoal pencil, making sure it's properly sharpened. That sharp point is crucial. It gives me control for defining small shapes like the eyelid or lash line. I don't rush in with detail, but I do start to commit more with the darkest darks. The placement has to feel natural, slightly sunken in, nestled into the shape of the head. I use the pencil to carefully anchor the upper lid, then immediately soften with a blending stump. This early structure will support everything that follows. I then continue layering the tones, now shaping the eye more clearly. At this stage, it's all about balance, deepening shadows while still protecting the softness. I move back and forth between pencil and blending stump. The stump helps to spread the pigment around the socket and into the lower lid. It's not just about the eye itself, it's the surrounding shapes that give it life. I pay attention to the subtle transition beneath the brow where the socket dips in. That small concave area, it needs depth but not harshness. So again, the pencil comes in just for accents and the stump helps melt it into place. Now I focus on enhancing the contrast while staying careful not to lose subtlety. I revisit the darkest spots, the upper lid crease, the pupil, maybe a bit of the lash line, always with a sharp pencil. I sharpen it often, even if it seems obsessive. It makes the difference between a dull smudge and a clear, crisp form. I also darken the shadow just below the eyebrow. That dip above the eye helps to seat it in space. It's easy to overlook, but it does so much for realism. With these adjustments, the eye starts to come alive. Not because I added more detail, but because the tones are now sitting in the right place. I begin the hair from the fringe, not just out of habit, but because it helps me anchor the drawing. This part sits close to the eye, so it naturally draws attention. I use a sharpened charcoal pencil to block in some clumps, not strands, never that, just directional masses. I think about the flow, how the hair falls, where it turns. At this point, I'm not chasing accuracy, just marking movement. I try not to overdo the pressure. A few soft suggestions are enough to begin hinting at structure. It's still early, so everything stays loose and open to change. I use mostly my blending stump here. This part is about smoothing, unifying, taking those early pencil marks and gently coaxing them into form. I work over the shapes with soft blending, thinking in blocks of tone rather than lines. Especially in the fringe, I want the shadow to settle in but not feel overworked. There's a softness in charcoal that lends itself to hair. It lets you suggest detail without drawing every fiber. I move lightly across the page, aiming for volume more than precision. At this stage, the hair begins to feel like it belongs to the head. I'm going back and forth between pencil and blending stump. Pencil to create the dark value, blending stump to spread the charcoal and create softness. I add selective accents under the fringe, along a few shadow lines, and at the crown. It's tempting to keep going, to chase detail. But I remind myself, this isn't the final layer. I keep the edges vague, especially near the top and sides. I want the hair to frame the face, not compete with it. So instead of finishing everything, I try to preserve light, to shape the forms by what I leave untouched. Later, I might come back to it, add a few more touches. But for now, this level of looseness feels just right. At this stage, I'm sketching in the ear, keeping it quite soft and almost impressionistic. It's not the focal point, so I try not to overwork it. Mostly done with the blending stump. It's just enough to suggest form. I remind myself that not every part needs attention. Some areas are better left whispering. Just some light refinements here and there, still staying loose. The form is taking shape slowly, and I find that comforting. Sometimes, these quieter moments in the process are where I feel most connected to the drawing. It's not about fixing, more about understanding what it wants to become. Now I notice the eyebrow wasn't quite strong enough, so I go in with pencil, then soften it with the blending stump. This small shift adds clarity to the gaze. I also darken the shadow beneath the nose, a delicate concave form that gives the face more depth. It's small moves like this that quietly change everything. Here, I focus on the subtle shading around the eyes, nose, and cheek. This area needs the softest touch. Too much pressure and the form becomes stiff. I let the tones drift in gently. It's not about lines, but rather the spaces between them, the breath of light that wraps around the form. Sometimes the marks I make are a reflection of how I feel. If I'm relaxed, the drawing moves effortlessly. There's something comforting about this moment. I'm not overthinking anything. The strokes feel like a whisper rather than a command. I'm letting the drawing breathe on its own, and it somehow makes me feel a little more present. This part is slower, but I've learned to be alright with that. There's no need to panic when things still look rough. I trust that if I keep showing up, the image will eventually appear. I used to rush, trying to fix everything too soon, but now I give it time, let it live in that uncertain stage for a while. That's when the real breakthroughs happen. Now I begin shaping the mouth. It's still loose, just suggestions of light and shadow, not edges. The mouth carries a lot of the character, so I try to be cautious. I work slowly, darkening in small passes, not fully committing yet. I want it to sit naturally within the face, not stand out too much, just enough to hint at a soft expression. Here, the mouth becomes more defined, but it's still all about softness. I'm not outlining anything, just building shadows and letting them blend. I think more about how the value shapes the feeling of the face. A slightly darker upper lip, a little depth beneath it. That's all it takes to make it feel real, and quiet, and warm. Now I begin slowly darkening parts of the face. It's a gradual process. I don't rush because once it gets too dark, it's difficult to pull it back. Bit by bit, I build the shadows. I'm not trying to finish anything here, just nudge it forward. The drawing asks for care, and charcoal rewards patience. I turn my attention to the neck. It doesn't need detail, just structure. I softly model the shadows beneath the chin and along the sides. This grounds the portrait, giving the head weight and presence. The key is to let it remain understated, so it supports the face rather than drawing focus. Now I begin suggesting the hanfu. I don't want to overwork it, just enough to feel like it's there. Loose lines, sweeping strokes. It's more about movement than accuracy. I want it to feel soft, like fabric in a breeze, just framing the figure gently, like the way clothing holds memory. Finally, I give a touch of mist around the head, just a gentle haze, brushed in to soften the edges. It makes the figure feel surrounded by quiet. I like this part. It's less about drawing, more about feeling. A way to say, this is where the portrait ends, without ever closing the door completely. Now that the face feels settled, I return to the hair. It still feels too light at the moment. I pick up my charcoal pencil again, laying down darker tones just where it needs more depth. Then I soften everything with the blending stump. These two tools, pencil and stump, give me the control I want without losing that painterly softness. It's a balance I've slowly come to appreciate. Still working on the hair here. This time, it's no longer about finding the shape, it's about completing the volume, deepening the shadows, gently pushing some strands into place, but I stay loose and try to group the strands together. The goal is never to define every lock, but to give an impression of light falling across a form. I add some loose marks around the head, abstract, almost spontaneous. I don't really plan these moments, but surprisingly, they give something, energy, atmosphere, maybe even mystery. I also noticed the shoulder line was a bit off, so I raised it slightly. It's a small change, but it helps the figure sit better on the page. Now the drawing is entering its final stretch. I'm not making big changes here, just little refinements, adjusting a bit of contrast here, softening a rough transition there. It's tempting to keep going, to keep fixing, but I try to slow down now. This stage is more about care than effort. At this point, the mood of the drawing starts to speak louder than the technique. When I draw loosely like this, I feel like I'm not just trying to create a photo, but rather I'm building a presence. There's a stillness in the expression, and I want to let that come through without getting in the way in. When you draw loosely like this, it's really important to trust the process. Even if I don't see instant results, I keep going. The values are slowly coming together. The forms feel more solid. I just follow the rhythm and let the piece will eventually unfold. I don't want to overwork anything. The painterly feel, this lightness, this looseness, that's what I've been chasing. And to preserve it, I have to know when to stop. There's a quiet joy in resisting the urge to perfect. In the past, I might have tightened every edge, chased every mistake. But this time, I've let go a little. And honestly, it feels freeing. If you've never tried drawing this way, letting things stay soft and imperfect, I really encourage you to give it a go. It's not only liberating, it teaches you to trust your eye, your instinct, and the moment. Thank you so much for joining me on this little drawing journey. It's been a quiet exploration into working more loosely, and I'm grateful you took the time to listen. If you enjoyed the video, do consider liking, commenting, or subscribing. It truly helps me continue sharing these moments. Until next time.